Thank you, everybody who is still here. We're really glad that you're still here and think this has been just a really incredible conversation today. And we want to give the Army Corps a chance to respond, talk about what they learned, and answer some of the questions that weren't answered. So we'll probably go for about half an hour more. Let's start. Bryce, do you want to introduce your team who's going to be answering questions? And do you want to take a few moments to respond to anything that you'd like to start off with?
Thank you, Amy. I think Olivia is actually, because she's in a room with most of us, going to kind of facilitate our responses. So I defer to her.
Thank
Whenever
you,
you're
Bryce.
ready, Olivia.
Yeah, can you hear me? We're doing a sound check.
Yes, we hear you great. And if
Okay,
it's possible
thank
to turn on your video.
Let's see if it's possible and still maintain the connection.
Okay. So it's going to come off here. Yeah.
All right.
Do you want to sit here?
I'll come around.
Okay.
Don't
We
worry,
have to
take
get
a moment if
creative.
you need it. Don't worry.
Okay. Get creative in our audio and visual setup in here.
All right.
Okay. So you can start the video there if you want to sit. It'll just be this camera here. First. Yeah.
Sorry, can you
Oh,
start
here,
the video
I'll
for
start it.
me?
Yeah. You'll flip them out. Yeah, there you go.
Hey, hi, my name is Olivia Cackler, and I am with New York District Planning Division, Plan Formulation Branch Chief. With me in the room is Mr. Cliff Jones, my Chief of Planning Division, Mr. Kyle McKay, who is our representative from the Engineering Research Development Center, Ms. Danielle Tomaso, who is, I'm sorry, I can't move the computer around because it's going to break the connection, our lead planner on the study, Ms. Regan McCauley, who is a support planner, and Mr. Arun here, who is our lead engineer. Also online, you've heard from Mr. Bryce Wisemiller, our project manager, and Ms. Carissa Scarpa, our chief of the watershed section in environmental analysis branch, and also Mr. Jesse Miller, our lead biologist. So I would first like to, on behalf of the team, we want to thank everybody for sending in the really helpful comments. You've given us a lot of food for thought. I think at the last count, there may have been, what, 150 or 175 comments. We're not going to be able to answer them in about 30 minutes, but we do commit to giving you written responses after today. Also, the comments that you have submitted will become part of the public record. It will become part of the report documentation. Now, before we get into the responses to your questions, I'd like to make a couple of points. The first is that the comment period for the draft report closes on March 7th, but this is actually the start of a long communication dialogue on the HAT study. There will be many more touch points where we will be reaching out for your feedback later in the study phase and also during design and construction. So please keep your comments coming. We want to have the record of them as we move through the refinement of the plan. Also, because some of the questions and concerns that you're raising right now, they're excellent. We're just not at that level yet. We don't have the detail required to address your concern. But if you keep sending the comments in, then we will have that record and we'll be able to come back to it when we have enough information to address that concern. The other point I'd like to make is that sorry. Yes. Sorry.
Take whatever time you need.
Yes, thank you, Danielle. The other comment I'd like to make is we saw recurring questions about what happens if my community was not included in the Army Corps' plan. So if that is the case, and you know that there is a flood risk for your community, please send that in as a comment because it may not have made it in because of the very conservative criteria that we used, However, that we still intend to provide flood risk for as much of the region as we can. And so we would be looking at non-structural or smaller structural measures for your community. And it would really help us if we had in writing that your community was left out and should be included. So that is an example of a very substantive comment, in terms of bang for buck. Those comments will go really far in our comment response process. Now, I would like to check with the other panelists here in the room if they had anything they wanted to add.
Sure. This is Kyle McKay with the Engineer Research and Development Center. Just to reinforce Olivia's point there about specificity. In my view, the most helpful comments come from whatever perspective and expertise and lived experience you may have. So if you work for an environmental nonprofit, providing specific comments about the environmental assessment can be extraordinarily helpful. Or if you're a citizen who lives on a street that floods and are looking at the alignment of a flood wall relative to where flooding occurs in your community, talk about which streets get wet the most. Specificity matters would be my only other addition there. Thank you,
Thanks,
Olivia.
Kyle. And I'd also like, Mr. Cliff Jones.
Yeah, hi, this is Cliff Jones. I just want to add or reinforce, great session today, great opportunity. We're looking for these same types of opportunities. So we've been going out, the team has been doing tremendous work, engaging with the public, whether face-to-face or virtually. But if there are opportunities, and I know I saw at least one comment in the chat, if there are opportunities to go to community boards or other sessions, definitely reach out to us and we'd be available to do exactly that. We look forward to having those discussions and engaging the communities, the EJ communities, whoever it is, and especially those that might feel that they're left out or they have specific needs for any of the things that we're talking about. So appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. I just want to check with our Army Corps staff online. Bryce, Carissa, Jesse, was there anything you wanted to
Right.
share?
Not me, Olivia. I think you, Cliff, and Kyle summed it up very nicely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Olivia. And I have nothing else on that. Thank you.
Well, I just want to thank you for your openness, and those were very good tips about how to give effective comments. And we are going to hold a session with the National Parks Conservancy Association on February 9th about writing effective comments. And if you'd like to send anyone, you are welcome to, or if you'd like to send us ahead of time, even a slide of what you think would be helpful, we would absolutely incorporate that in. It'll be a 1-hour session, and everyone who's watching can sign up for that session on our website. We did get a bunch of comments today that weren't about storm surge, but really trying to understand how heavy rain plays into it. As you know, Hurricane Ida, our region lost a lot of people. We've also have lots of other climate hazards that we know are life and death situations, heat. We just saw what happened in Buffalo just a couple of weeks ago, in New York State, wondering how that plays into the federal planning. And if there's anything that you can talk to about how this plan could be adapted to incorporate those plans.
Climate hazards.
So this region is going to get colder and wetter, and we're going to see more extreme heat days. We've already been experiencing it. Just wondering how, maybe you could talk to how other regions in the Army Corps have incorporated other climate hazards into their projects, or how you might be able to do that here.
So if I start out the discussion, I know the team is going to help me, if not kick me or correct me. So what we're trying to do with this study, it really is focused on storm surge. But with that in mind, it is taken into account the other aspects, making sure that we're not inducing anything when those other things happen. So if there is rain or precipitation added in, that they're taken care of with any project that we put forward. So some of that is incorporated to a certain extent. Same thing with sea level change, making sure that we're addressing the future with the project, with those added functions that may result in that. There are other opportunities though. So we've seen a WRDA passed, Water Resource Development Act passed. Recently, we've had a few other bills, the bipartisan infrastructure law and the disaster supplemental act passed, and those do account for certain other aspects where we might be able to address some of the stormwater management under different authorities. So it's a lot to account for, not trying to build too much into what we're already doing, but there might be other avenues. There are other avenues to address some of those other factors. If anybody else wanted to add to that.
Yeah, so thanks, Cliff. I just wanted to add that the Water Resources Development Act that allows the Corps to participate more in the stormwater actions is Section 219, it's commonly known as. And for that, projects have to be specifically named to be considered. There is a risk to making one study trying to do too many things at once. It means we might not be able to accomplish the primary purpose. Now, Amy, that question you asked, I'm gonna take it in a direction, because a lot of the questions that we received were also related to if we induce flooding. And by that, I mean, once we put a project in place, we are not allowed to make the flooding worse, either on the outside of the wall that we're putting up. That is, if the wall's up and then the flood water gets displaced on either side of it, we need to put in measures to mitigate for that, what we're calling induced flooding on either side or across from where the wall is. And we're also required behind a wall on the land side of any seawall or flood wall to ensure that we are not making the interior drainage worse. So that's called interior. And that's normally rainfall runoff or stormwater infrastructure. And so there is a term I'm going to use. Arun, feel free to jump in if I'm not using it correctly, but we are required to provide something called a minimum facility, which is we need to take whatever measures are required to make it so that the interior flooding is not any worse because we put in a project. So once we have put in the minimum facility, after that, then we might be allowed to look into additional interior drainage measures, like maybe instead of a swale, we could look at a pump station. And if it's incrementally justified on an economic basis, we maybe be able to recommend moving forward on that as part of the Army Corps recommendation. It is a very big and complicated topic, but the takeaway is that we're not allowed to make any existing flooding worse.
Thank you for that answer. I think, I know you might not have the complete answer to it. I do appreciate you trying to answer. I think the nuance to the question is, we understand that you cannot make flooding worse, and that's a great thing, but that seems to be the bare minimum. We're asking, like, how can you make heat islands be better? Or how could you make the issues with groundwater and the tables, flooding in the sewers that we're already seeing? We're going to probably see it in Rockaway tonight. How could you make it better with this project? So you don't have to answer it. I understand you might not have the question, the answer right now, but I think that's really how people are thinking about it. Can we create something that maybe instead of it being a wall, being something else that is a wall plus that has these other enhancements to it? You mentioned the WRDA, and we're very excited that WRDA was recently passed. There was conversation earlier today in the session with the governments, with the non-federal partners, and there was a question about whether or not we can use local climate predictions for your study. We had believed that it was incorporated into WRDA, that we are able to do it. So if you have a resource like we do here in New York City for the NPCC, that you are able to incorporate that but perhaps we don't understand it. Can you clarify?
I do have section 113 of the Water Resources Development Act of 2020 up on my computer because I saw that point, and that doesn't track with my understanding of what section 113 says. It's ordering us to revise our planning guidance and regulations on how we might want to incorporate like the additional science and technology, but it does not allow us. We're still required to formulate according to the Army Corps' sea level rise curves. That said, Matt Chobus was correct that in addition to formulating against our curves, which are the historic, the intermediate, and the high rate, we are also allowed to look into the sensitivity of how the local curve affects our plan selection or project performance. The other thing I should add is that we are looking at the timescales over the 100 years. And when we do that, the difference between between the Army Corps' curves and the local curves, it's not as big as you would think. It seems big on our other projects because we've been looking at 50 years out, but especially on this study, we've been looking 100 years out. So compared to the federal curve, I think by 2100, we're talking about 5 feet of sea level rise. And I believe on the local curve, it was 6 feet. So it's not as big a spread as you might think.
It's still quite substantial, a whole foot. You mentioned the cost prohibitive, and we had a question earlier today asking about what would be determined cost prohibitive. You were talking about just before you were talking about potentially being able to, for instance, put a pump in that might be able to address their stormwater issues. And you said, but it might be deemed cost prohibitive. I was wondering how you determine that. This is obviously a very expensive study. Is there any guidelines that you've been given for this region?
I don't believe cost prohibitive
Well,
is an actual term.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm sorry if
and
I
maybe there's some
got it
confusion
wrong.
just in the term. I think when you were talking about, well, whatever we decide to put in, whether we may be able to add pumps or not, whether it's incrementally justified in certain areas, but it's all based on the benefit that whatever solution provides. So if that cost is, let us say for argument's sake, twice as much as the benefit, then it's cost prohibitive if you use that language. What we have here with the cost that we have for the project that we're putting forward, we're finding that we're over double in our benefit what that cost is. So that's the measurement that we have. I know, and I'll just use the forum to say also, we do have opportunity to look at multiple accounts to ensure that we're addressing the environmental quality, the regional benefits, the social benefit. So there are things that go in addition to that national economic benefit category, but that does form the basis for what it is that we're moving forward.
Okay, thank you. On that kind of benefits versus costs, we have a question here. If you can explain your cost benefit analysis and what is put into it and whether or not it is about the cost of repairing existing infrastructure and putting back what was there, or if it also takes into consideration the loss of human life and social impacts, private structures, business loss, and how you're able to calculate that.
That's a lot to unpack. But on the most basic level, the benefits that we have been reporting are the national economic development benefits. And the way we've calculated so far, the majority of those benefits are coming from the structure value and their contents. And what we are tracking is the depreciated replacement value for those structures. So we recognize that there are definitely limitations to this approach because it is very, very direct. We also do look into critical infrastructure benefits as well in terms of having to replace elements of critical infrastructure that are damaged, and also traffic delays are factored into our calculations. However, and this is something that we readily acknowledge, we are not picking up the secondary and tertiary benefits. For instance, business losses due to traffic disruptions. We're not picking that level up. Or the value that a library has as a community center is not really being picked up either. And we probably may be better off looking at that under other social effects. Other social effects include environmental justice considerations and life safety as well. So when you're asking how human life is valued, I think our agency's position is that it is impossible to put a value on human life. So there's not going to be a monetary amount. However, there may be a project that doesn't meet the NED, the National Economic Development Criteria, but we think it's worth pursuing because it provides life safety benefits. So that's another venue we might be able to pursue a recommendation under. So I'm just going to pause in case anyone from the team wants to jump in.
Okay. A lot of questions that we had before this was about nature-based solutions, and I think you saw kind of the energy of the shallows in Jamaica Bay. I don't know if you had an opportunity to see Phil's presentation before today, or if you just saw it today, but the idea that we might be able to do something else besides hard infrastructure.
Take that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Hi, this is my name's Rune here. I'm the coastal engineer on the project. Yeah, I found that presentation very interesting, actually, and I'm interested in talking to Philip and reading his research papers on that. But I will tell you that is not something that we have considered in Jamaica Bay as a solution. We've been primarily looking at traditional natural and nature-based features, such as the ones that were shown in the earlier presentations. That is an interesting concept with its own challenges regarding, filling in federal navigation channels. But, really appreciate that information, and we'll certainly be coordinating and looking more into that research.
Hey, Arun, if I can add, this is Cliff again. So what we have been finding, though, and I missed that presentation, unfortunately, but the gray solutions, if you will, the surge barriers that we've been talking about, really offer that level of risk reduction for those more infrequent storms. So those larger events are requiring some degree of gray, and that's what we've primarily been focusing the attention on, because those are the biggest cost items. Now, when we have that kind of settled in, we have been looking at a lot of the nature-based and softer solutions and non-structural approaches to complement that, because we recognize that with any gray structure, there's going to be some, if not residual risk, there's going to be some frequent flooded areas based on the higher frequency storms. So there is opportunity to look at something like what Phil Orton put out, and I think the team is willing to look at that. From what I understand, it was great comments, great presentation, and we still have work to do on the natural nature-based features. So more to follow on that one.
Thank you.
Great, and maybe this will be our last question. We had a lot of questions during the day about maintenance and operations afterwards, and lots of concerns about who would be responsible, but also who would foot the bill for different interventions. Wondering how you look at that, and whether or not you're working out maintenance plans for different potentials with the different government entities.
So on a broad scale, operation and maintenance of these projects is a non-federal responsibility. And with that in mind, we have been taking into account non-federal concerns. So as we've looked into alternatives, if a non-federal sponsor says that is a lot to maintain or operate, we factor that into the calculations, into our benefit cost ratio. However, I will add as a caveat that it's a non-federal responsibility unless Congress mandates otherwise. So I think that is what happened down in New Orleans. In New Orleans, Congress mandated that the operation and maintenance should be a federal responsibility.
Wow.
And that's what happened there, but it is definitely on an individual basis.
Thank you for that. I think
Also-
that's very interesting information.
Mhm.
But go ahead, you were going to say something? I don't want to cut you off.
Oh, just that, while we try to factor in to the best of our ability what the operations and maintenance requirements are, we're really so early in the process that it's hard to provide the specifics.
Yes, we definitely understand. I think I'm going to squeeze in one last question about water quality, because people have been asking a lot about water quality. We are in an area that has been dealing with CSOs for many, many, many years. And we also have at least two Superfund sites. We have the Gowanus Canal and Newtown Creek that would have interventions. And those are areas, at least for Gowanus, I know, that flood regularly and are having major, major problems already. Can you just address how this plan would address water quality generally, but also for the two Superfund sites?
All right, so this one, I know my limitations. So Kyle or Jesse online, can you take this question?
Yeah, I'll speak to this a little bit. Excuse me. So with water quality and environmental effects of these barriers, it's a dual-edged sword. I think Dr. Orden alluded to this earlier, where in some cases, you may think about a barrier altering hydrodynamics in a way that could affect water quality on a day-to-day basis. The other side of the sword, though, is that some of these Superfund sites may be prevented from being flooded. So the probability of spreading the contaminants around during a flood may be reduced. So it's a trade-off there between the barrier affecting water quality and the barrier preventing water quality changes through flooding. And that's the balance between those two dipoles there. Obviously, with the barriers affecting water quality, we're doing as much analysis as we can to understand the hydrodynamic effects of these structures and what we think may happen as a result of that. Does that clarify that issue a little bit?
Jason, on the water quality, on the shallows issues, I think there's a lot of folks in this region that have expertise. We have lots of community members that have expertise about their community, and we have lots of other members of the community who are experts. And just maybe you could just shed light on like how you've been working with different people with expertise throughout this process, and then also throughout the open comment period. Because I'm sure there are other experts that were watching today that might have some suggestions.
Absolutely. So in that regard, Dr. Orden graciously invited us to the workshops he hosted. So when he assembled experts through NOAA funding, our teams participated and we had our ears open and our notebooks full of notes. So we're trying to listen to what the community's saying and tackle those issues one by one as they come up. But as he pointed out, some of them we haven't gotten to yet. For instance, looking at the effects on migratory organisms. We've started with the effects on regional ecosystems as a major priority issue that we knew folks would want to know the answer to in the draft report. And now we're working through how these different structures may affect movement of organisms. So we've got a big laundry list of topics identified by experts, and now we're trying to go through and respond to those issues one by one. And then in terms of other forms of leveraging expertise, the team has worked extensively with our research labs to do some of the hydrodynamic modeling and things like that. So for instance, we're applying a two-dimensional model called the ADH to look at how these barriers could affect velocity and depth on very small timescales and at very high spatial resolutions as a result of the project. So trying to leverage expertise where appropriate throughout the study.
Well, thank you. And we're 2 minutes over, so we will cut it here, but I just wanted to thank you everyone, the entire staff of the Army Corps has been working on this for so many years, and we really appreciate all your dedication to this region. And we know it's just one milestone that you've gotten through, and we have a long way to go. So thank you very much. Just also want to thank all of our incredible speakers today. We will be posting the videos and the presentations as soon as we can. It takes a while. I think it's a couple of days really for a long video to process through Zoom. So give us a little bit of time, but we'll let you know. We're also going to be sending out a form, so you could let us know what you've learned today and what you'd like to learn in the future. And did I forget anything? Anyone else? No?
Oh, I'd like to say, Amy and Joanna, thank you so much for organizing this. This was a really monumental effort, and I think it's going to be very helpful for us moving forward.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much. Do you have any upcoming meetings that you want to plug to? Well, just
They
let
are-
people know where they are.
Okay,
Is
Sure.
It's on the Hat Study website?
yes.
All your
Mhm.
upcoming meetings? And can
Yes.
they there also submit if they would like you to come to their neighborhood organization?
Yes, they can also make a request.
Okay, great.
through that
And
site.
we'll of course forward any requests. So if you don't know how to find that, just let us
And I'll
know.
just say, Amy, just on that note, so similarly, we just got a request in from the Queensborough President's Office. Actually coincides with the virtual meeting that we're having on February. Well, forget the date. But we definitely welcome
7th.
the opportunity. And so they're gonna have their community board meeting at the same time, and they're gonna dial into the virtual
Oh,
meeting
that's great.
on February 6th.
Yep, that's great. Well, thank you. And we still have 90 people on. So thank you all for being with us all day. We really appreciate it. And please make sure you talk about this at your dinner table and talk about this at your community meetings and let people know that this is happening so they can participate too. Have a great evening.
Thank you.